Okay, so I've got this expression, and what it's asking me to do is factor. So I want to factor this out. I want to break it down. I want to break it apart. Okay. Now, in this case, I only have two numbers. I just have two terms. So if I only have two terms, most likely I'm going to do greatest common factor. Not every case do you do greatest common factor, but most likely, as long as there's something in common between the two. Okay, I'm going to look for the GCF between the two numbers. Now, there's a couple different ways you can do this. You can do it just by looking at the two numbers, or if you guys remember, you can set up the box. Now, remember, if it's just two numbers, I only just need two boxes like that. And then those numbers go inside the boxes. So I'll put 4y cubed here, and I'm putting negative 6y squared there. And make sure you guys always include the sign as well. Now, the first thing you want to start with is the coefficient, the numbers in the front, 4 and 6. And you say, what is the greatest common factor between those two numbers? What can you divide into 4 and 6? What's the biggest number? 2. All right. So there's a common factor between the coefficients. What is in common? What's the greatest common factor between y squared and y cubed? I'm sorry, y cubed and y squared. What's in common? They both have at least 2 y's. So if I have 3 here and 2 there, they both have 2. This has 3, but they both have at least 2. So in other words, it's the most y's in common. Sorry, that's a 2 right there. So that's 2y squared. Okay, now on the top of the box or the bottom, it doesn't really matter if you use the top or the bottom. I'm going to figure out 2y squared times what is going to give me that term there. Well, first I'm starting with the number 2 times 2, and then y squared times what gives me y cubed? Well, just y. Okay, and then I go to the next term and do the same thing. 2 times minus 3 is 6, and then y squared times what will give me y squared? Well, just 1, so I don't need to multiply anything. Okay, so now I write this out as 2y squared, the common factor, the GCF in the front. And then the numbers on the bottom go inside parentheses together as another factor. So again, that right there is your GCF, the 2y squared. So if the problem asks you just for the greatest common factor, you would just write that. But if it asks you to factor it, you're also going to include this part of it as well. Okay, and that's it. You stop there. There's nothing else you need to do when it's asking you to factor. You just break it down, factor it out as much as you can, and then stop there. Okay, so now let's take a look at the next act. So pretty much all the problems in that first one are just like that. Okay, so now let's look at ones like this. Let's check out a different, let's see if I can get a different one here. They're all pretty similar. So we'll just go with those. All right, so here, the next one, the difference is you have 3 numbers. All right, so v squared plus 4v plus 3. The other difference is that there's nothing in common between all 3 numbers. This one we had a 2 in common in y's, but this one they don't all have v. And 1, 4, and 3 don't have a common factor other than 1. Okay, so this is the case where I need to do the box or diamond. Now, what I do want to emphasize is that when you have only 1 as the first number for a trinomial, or when you have these 3 numbers, if it's just 1, you can do a shortcut. So here I can go straight from this to the factors. You'll have 2 factors. Now, first, what I'll do to kind of show you is set up the X or diamond. And let's put that over here in the notes as well. Now, remember the number on the top. Well, first of all, before I say that, the first number is your A. That makes this B and this C. The number at the top, what two numbers do you multiply to get the number ones on top? What? It's A times C, your first and your last. And then the number on the bottom is the B, the number in the middle. Okay, so the number on the top here would be 1v squared times 3, which is 3v squared. And the number on the bottom would be 4v. Now it's what two numbers do you multiply to get A times C? But then the same two numbers are going to add up to 4v. What would they be? So what multiplies the 3 but adds up to 4? 3 and 1. Now it's actually 3v and 1v, okay, because you have to include the v there to get to that term. But as long as, again, that first number is 1, I can take those numbers and go straight to my factor, straight to the answer. Now the first two terms in each of these will be v. And then what do you guys think I put there and there? Yep, +1 and +3, or +3 and +1. It doesn't matter what order you put it in. It's still the same. Okay, and then that's it. Those are the factors. So that basically just goes there, and then this one goes there. Now again, that's only if the shortcut only works when you have 1 as your first coefficient. Only when first number is 1. So shortcut only when the first number is 1. Okay, so we'll do one more like that. So now let's say I've got x squared minus, I don't know, 8, and then we'll say plus 12. 12? Yeah, we'll say plus 12. So I'm going to go straight to that. I'm going to write those out, write out my factors, the parentheses, and then draw out the x. On top, first will be a times c, so 12x squared. On the bottom will be negative 8x to b. And again, what two numbers multiply to 12, but then add up to negative 8? So negative, you said negative 8 and negative 4? No.
Negative 6, negative 2.
There you go. So, so negative 6x and negative 2x. So now here x, and then we have minus 6 and minus 2. So literally just once I find those numbers, they go right in there. And that's it. Again, you don't need to go any further. You're not solving for anything. You're not trying to figure out x equals this or that. That's literally all it's asking for when you factor. So when you guys are working on the packet, you'll see that with some of the problems, like that's GCF. This is a case where you don't have a number of 1 in the front, and that's what we'll go over next, is what do you do when you have numbers? First of all, you have cubed here, and here you have cubed, and the number in the front's not 1. So now what do we do? Okay, so let me give you guys a chance to
3.
Right. So if I have that in common, I'm going to factor that out. Actually, sorry, I forgot to include one more variable. So there should be 24x here, an x right after the 24. So the common factor for the coefficients is 3. And then what's the common factor for all the x variables? Because they all have x. So how many x's in common? 1, 2, 3? Yeah, just 1. Because really what you're doing is you're looking at the smallest number. The smallest coefficient is 3, that's the common factor. The smallest amount of x's is just x, so it's just 1x. All right, so now I factor that out. And now I say 3x times what gives me 3x cubed? That's just x squared. The next, -6 times 3 gives me 18. But then x times x gives me x squared. Go to the next one. And 3 times what gives me 24? That's 8. Do I need to multiply an x as well to make it 24x? No, just 8. So now, if you guys look at it, that second part of that expression, I can factor that even more. Because now it looks like this problem, like we just did. So what I'm going to do is now factor just the second part of it. Okay, and I'm going to set this up. Again, if you notice, I have a number with just 1 in the front. So I can do the shortcut. So now I have 8x squared on top, because x squared times 8, and then the -6 on the bottom. Two numbers that multiply to 8, but add up to -6. 4 and 2, but they're -6, so what do I have to make the numbers? Both negative, right? So the -4, -2, and then those go straight into the parentheses. So now x minus 4 from there, and then x minus 2 from there. So in this is a case where I had to do 2 steps to factor. First, we did GCF. So the first step was GCF first. And then the second part was the diamond, or X, or whatever you want to call it. So that's 2-step factoring. So sometimes you got to do 2 steps. So the last one I'm going to do is going to be factoring, but also solving at the same time. Okay. Okay, so last one. So here at the top, we're going to label this. First, I'm going to have my Cornell note column over here. Label this number 5. And the problem we're going to look at is 5x squared. And let's see, minus 13. And then minus 6. Sometimes it doesn't always look nice and pretty and easy. Sometimes they're going to be a little bit bigger numbers to deal with. Now, when you guys do the first page, you'll notice that it just says factor. And then when you get to the second page, you'll notice the difference between all the problems is they're all equal to 0. So as soon as you see that, you know you're going to solve. So you're going to take it the next step. You're basically going to do the same thing, but take it one step further. And the key is that it's asking you to solve this time. Okay, so what I'm going to do indifferently is take that same one, make it equal to 0. And this time we're going to solve after factoring. Okay, so first thing, we'll set up the x. So 5x squared times -6 be -30. And then -13 goes on the bottom. Now I think, what two numbers multiply to 30 but add up to -13?
-10, -3.
Okay. So it's 10 and 3. So, but sometimes some of us have trouble figuring that out. So one way to figure that out is start listing out what numbers multiply to 30. Start with 1 times 30, then 2 times 15, then 3 times 10. Then what would be the next one? 5 times 6. And then decide, okay, all those numbers multiply to 30, which ones are either going to add up to the number, the b, or at least subtract and give you b. Well, that'd be the 10 and the 3. And then you got to decide, are they negative? Are they positive? Okay, is that going to work? Oh, oops. One of these is supposed to be positive, isn't it? Wait, did I do that right? No, wait, the 3 and the 10 doesn't work. You guys see why 3 and 10 does not work? Watch this. All right, I'm gonna throw the 3 and the 10. Now to get that to be negative, right, to multiply, I'd have to make only one of these negative. But if I add those together, that doesn't equal -13. Right, so that means I've got to use actually the 15 and the 2. So it might look the part, but you got to double check it. You got to check to make sure we're good. So now if I multiply -15 and 2, that gives me -30. And if I add -15 plus 2, that also gives me -13. So that's where you got to be careful, because sometimes it might look like one works, but you got to double check to make sure it really does. All right, so now it's time for the box, and we found those two numbers. So as a reminder for the box, put that over here. The top left number is always your first term. The bottom right is your last term. And then the numbers from, I'll say the numbers from the diamond go here. So after you find those two numbers, those go here. So first term, 5x squared. Last term, -6 from the equation. And then I take those two numbers that go in the other boxes. And the one I always like to start with is this top left corner. What two numbers are going to multiply to 5x squared? Well, we know that 5 times 5x and x will give you 5x squared, but where does the 5 go? Does it go on the top or the side? Mm-hmm. Would it go above the 5 or to the side of the 5? Right, it goes to the top. And if you look at it, if you look at 15 and 5, the common factor between those two is 5. So if I go straight up and down, I know that that's the common factor. If I go straight across this way, the common factor between 5 and 2 is just 1. So that's where the x goes. Okay, so now I just fill in the rest. X times 2 is 2x. And then 5x times -3 is -15. And then double check, does -3 times 2 equal -6? We're good, so it works. All right, so that is your factors, but that is not your answer because it asks you to solve. So you have to go one step further. So we want to know, when will these equal 0? So if I take out each of these factors and make them equal to 0, I can figure that out. Now the easy one, which most people remember, is what is the answer from x minus 3? What do you get? Right, just 3, because you take the number and then do what with it? Switch the sign, right? Because x is a liar. Okay, or you can just take them out and solve them. So here I just take it out, I subtract 2 on both sides, and then divide by 5, and I can see my answer is -2/5. And then for this one, I add 3, so x equals 3. So you see I had to take it one step further. If it's -3, I know it's +3. Here, if it's positive, I know it's going to be negative. And the shortcut to do for this one, when you have a number in the front of the x, is that number goes on top, the 2, and then that number goes on the bottom for the fraction. Okay. All right, so that is it for